In particular, we're going to look at fear as an emotion that is often associated with a response to danger, since this is how the word fear is most often used, even in religious contexts. Emotions depend on several branches of the nervous system, but for now, let's just concentrate on two, the interoceptive network and the autonomic nervous system. We perceive affect mainly through the interoceptive network. The interoceptive network picks up signals not so much from the outside world, but from inside the body itself. So when we feel our stomach aching, our heart racing, our lungs burning, that's interoception. By contrast, when we see a landscape, hear a friend's voice, smell rotting garbage, that's exteroception, not interoception. Now, this makes sense, right? When we experience emotional feelings, we feel them in the body. We don't see, smell, or hear our own fear. Among other things, interoception tracks the autonomic nervous system, which plays a huge role in our emotional feelings. The autonomic nervous system deals with the automatic regulation of things like heart rate, breathing, digestion, and many other bodily functions that we don't have to consciously worry about. For example, if I go for a run, my heart rate will automatically increase in order to provide more oxygen to my bodily tissue. I don't have to think about making my heart beat faster. The autonomic nervous system takes care of that for me. In the same way, when I'm confronted with a dangerous situation, I don't have to tell my heart or lungs how to respond. The autonomic nervous system has two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system mobilizes the body's resources to confront challenges. This is the famous fight or flight system, although this nickname is a bit misleading since the sympathetic nervous system isn't just about confronting danger, but about engaging with challenging situations in general. The parasympathetic nervous system, by contrast, is active when the body is at rest and restoring itself. In what follows, I'm relying on the work of neurophysiologist Stephen Porges, a leading expert in the autonomic nervous system. We'll start with the sympathetic nervous system, which often but not always plays a role in our experience of fear. The sympathetic nervous system mobilizes the body's resources to deal with challenges. This may involve dilating the pupils so that the eyes take in more light, accelerating the heart so as to provide more oxygen for bodily organs, and inhibiting digestion, presumably to conserve energy for more pressing matters. Some of these changes we may be aware of, like the increased heart rate, and some we may not, like the slowing down of digestion. The parasympathetic nervous system basically does the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system allows the body to rest and restore itself by constricting the pupils, slowing the heart, and promoting digestion. These lists, of course, are not exhaustive, but I think we get the idea. Let's summarize this theory briefly before moving on. The autonomic nervous system prepares the body to confront challenges or to relax and to recuperate. The interoceptive network perceives changes in the autonomic nervous system. Affect interprets interoceptive signals as attractive or repellent based on what's going on in the body, in the world, information coming from memories, and other things. Challenges that engage the sympathetic nervous system may be interpreted as either attractive or repellent, depending on the context. For example, fear and enthusiastic excitement might use similar autonomic responses. But one is repellent, namely fear, and the other is attractive, namely enthusiastic excitement. The same is true of resting states. Boredom is a resting state, but it's not an attractive one. So why is this important? Let's break down the affect involved in fear of danger with an example from Matthew's Gospel. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the lake, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking towards them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. What provokes the disciples' affective response? They believe they're seeing a ghost. Their sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear to mobilize their body's resources to confront the danger. Their interoceptive network senses the body's response. Finally, affect interprets the bodily state, the perception of the ghost, thoughts about ghosts in general, and so on to form the interpretation. This is dangerous. Get me out of here. The disciples might have taken a few courses of action, hiding under their cloaks, jumping out of the boat, throwing things at the ghost, and so on. They settle for screaming their heads off. If they had perceived their situation as almost hopelessly dangerous, they might have fainted. Now, fainting is indicative of repellent affect and is a response to fear, but does not engage the sympathetic nervous system. In this gospel passage, then, the disciples feel their aversion as an arousing call to confront a challenge. Their bodies and minds are at high alert. Because their sympathetic nervous system is engaged, they're more likely to perform certain behaviors and not others. They scream in terror. They don't laugh or ask Jesus in for a group hug. There are exceptions, but Porges postulates that when the sympathetic nervous system is active, we're less likely to forge social bonds. Perhaps we can compare this to our own experience. During experiences of deep intimacy with a friend or family member, do we generally feel as though we're in danger? In most instances, probably not. When we're in situations that we experience as uncomfortable, challenging, or dangerous, do we tend to focus our attention on connecting with people? Again, it's possible, but unlikely. The activation of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems influences the kinds of things we focus our attention on and the kinds of behaviors we're likely to engage in. In general, then, we can say that when fear is a response to serious danger, fear usually involves repellent affect experienced in part through the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. As a negative emotion, fear of danger usually entails that we either want to get rid of the danger or to get away from it. And when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged to help us to escape or to eliminate the danger, we're less likely to be able to focus on relaxing or on forging intimate relationships. Also, the mobilization of resources that the sympathetic nervous system entails comes at a physiological cost. When the body is at high alert, it isn't restoring itself, taking care of the housekeeping, so to speak. If fear and anxiety are experienced over long periods, they can be detrimental to our health.
Sometimes when we're talking about fear of God, what we actually mean is we see God as a kind of challenge that we have to contend with. We see lots of examples of this in Scripture and in the Christian tradition, with things like attempting to pacify God's anger with penance, or to sway God's judgment with prayer, or to avert God's wrath with sacrifice. Do you remember poor prophet Jonah? He actually tried to run away from God, and he wasn't the only one. So with all of this in mind, we might ask, does fear of God, seen in this light at least, does fear of God bring us closer to God? Or does it try to keep God at a safe distance? This is a question we'll explore more fully in the next video.